Every now and then, Hollywood has turned to comic books as its savior. Comic books definitely laid the foundation for some of Hollywood's major blockbusters. The four-colored universe of hilarious novels has inspired many entertaining movies and television episodes, ranging from Men in Black and 300 to Walking Dead and Two Guns. But just because something is built on a comic does not guarantee that it'll be a hit. Nobody understands this principle more than Ryan Reynolds, especially after the Green Lantern fiasco. Reynolds attempted to launch his action hero campaign before he found Deadpool with Blade Trinity, X-Men Origins Wolverine, Green Lantern, and RIPD, the poorest of the group. If you are unfamiliar with the idea of RIPD, it's essentially Men in Black except with deceased police officers battling ghosts rather than aliens. It is basically an insane Hellboy spin-off that will remind you of Men in Black, but with hell demons. Let us explore more about the RIPD comics and the movies in our video today. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The advent of RIPD from the comics. The story begins with Sheriff Roy Powell pointing his gun at a Hellraiser who has held his partner captive and is using him as a shield. The Hellraiser in question is a muscular creature with a head of a boar and the body of a human with a snake head for a tail and is purple in color. Powell tries shooting the creature, but he misses, making him resort to a mockery of a pig to rile up the creature. This only agitates the creature more, and he attacks Powell with his tail. Powell makes one last attempt, and this time he makes the impression of a duck, and the Hellraiser throws his captive towards Powell, who takes a clear shot, sending the creature on a one-way trip to hell. By this time, the damage had been done. Powell's partner, whom he introduces as Irish Mackenzie, had been shot through his chest, and he bids adieu to Powell right in his lap. After this, we get to know that Powell has been doing this job for the last 100 years and he'll retire in 3 weeks at the end of his contract. Meanwhile, we see a man being buried in front of his friends and family. The dead man thinks out loud that he was supposed to be meat for the worms, but instead he is filling out forms. The man here is Nick Cruz, who is a little confused since he remembers himself being dead. He narrates how he died following a lead to a drug lab alongside his partner Nettles. They're taking down labs producing a street drug named Ash. He reveals that he was an impulsive cop who never waited for backup out of fear that he might have to share his spotlight. Nick entered the house via the back entrance, and Nettles was supposed to be his point guard. As Nick entered the building, a kid told Nettles that the house was empty and had been vacated 3 weeks prior. Nick further narrates that it seemed a little fishy to him since it seemed too quiet and too easy. When he tried to enter a locked door, all of a sudden he was riddled with bullets, leading to his early demise. After that, as the investigation proceeded, the cops ruled out self-defense since Nick hadn't fired a single shot, and the only conclusion left with them was cold-blooded murder. The judgment makes Nick wonder why someone would want to murder him since he was a good cop who had graduated first in his class and was a happy man with a family. As Nick was struggling with the forms to mention the person who caused his death, a bald, stubby man in a double-breasted suit approached him with an offer. The man, J.J. Kappas, a lawyer, presented Nick with a contract to find his killer. Meanwhile, in Pandemonium, the capital of hell, we see the Hellraiser named Snuff that was earlier imprisoned by Powell having a word with a man named Black Book who tells him that a Hellraiser named Speck is attempting to make an escape. Snuff asks Speck about his plan and asks to be a part of it, although Speck initially declines Snuff's offer but reconsiders after a little convincing. Snuff asks Speck how he plans on escaping, to which he replies through the front gate with his secret weapon. Snuff initially doubts him but goes along with the plan. As they approach the front gate, they come across the three-headed dog threatening to devour the two, but settling for a piece of honey cake, Speck's secret weapon. The two then escape through the front gate and swim across the river Styx. At the same time, Nick signs the contract without reading it properly, consumed with the thought that it would allow him to go out and find his killer. Once he signs the agreement, the lawyer tells him to go through a door to find everything that he is looking for. As he goes through the door, he cannot believe what he comes across and exclaims, "What the hell?" Right after, a hand covers his mouth, telling him that they do not mention the word hell in that place. Nick is shocked to see different types of creatures in what appears to be a police station. He wonders where he is. Powell tells him that they are in the Rest in Peace department. Nick tells him that he has never heard of this place and thinks it's probably some dream. Powell assures him that it isn't a dream, but they are the police force for God keeping a check on people in the afterlife. In another part of the city, Father Dominic Dore is helping the poor with some food. He walks into an alleyway and offers soup to someone who is hiding inside a box. But as it grabs the bowl of soup from Father Dore, he notices that it's not human hand, but that of a Hellraiser. The creature is none other than Speck, who gulps down a rat with the soup. But Speck wasn't there for the soup. Instead, he wanted to know the location of the sword of Archangel Michael. Nick, on the other hand, is still having trouble believing everything. He gets summoned by Captain Barnett, who welcomes him, but Nick refuses by saying that he isn't a part of anything. Barnett mentions that the brand in his jacket says otherwise, and sure enough, when Nick opens his shirt, he sees the brand of RIPD, where previously he had his police badge. Barnett also provides him with his new gun that fires cremators, a bullet that kills souls. He also introduces Powell to Nick as his new partner. Powell tells Nick what they do, that is, they kill anything that is trying to escape their afterlife into the mortal realm. Nick tries to escape Powell and tries to call his wife, but Powell stops him and asks if he has read his contract properly. Powell tells him that the contract allows Nick to find his killer, and then essentially he is bound to serve the RIPD for 100 years. Meanwhile, Speck is still torturing Father Dominic and kills him by ripping his skin apart. Powell and Nick arrive at the house where Nick was killed, and a lady gets the door. Both of them tell the lady that they are here to follow up on the investigation of a crime that occurred earlier. The lady tells them that she and her husband got this place after that. Suddenly, a strange voice startles them, and the lady tells them that her baby must be up and she needs to attend to the baby. Powell finds it fishy and approaches the door with his gun pointing towards it. They see the woman holding a baby Hellraiser when they open the door. At the same time, the woman's husband, another Hellraiser, shows up and attacks Powell, who drops his gun while the baby Hellraiser attacks Nick. Just as the woman is about to kill Powell with a gun, Nick kills the woman and throws his weapon towards Powell to take care of her husband. They also kill the baby and conclude that the house is guarding a portal that lets demons enter the human world. Before leaving, they destroy the house and any evidence along with it. Back at RIPD, Powell tells the captain that Nick was lured to a gateway without him realizing it. Barnett asks Powell to help Nick get ready before his retirement. As he comes out of Barnett's office, Nick has already left. Powell finds Nick sitting across the street from his house, seeing his daughter asking someone to read her something. Later, we see Nettles, Nick's ex-partner, eating dinner with his wife. As Nick is sulking in his misery, we come across Speck, who has retrieved the sword of Archangel Michael from its resting place. After seeing his wife have a romantic dinner with his ex-partner, Nick decides to escape the pain with alcohol. Nick and Powell end up at a pub, and Nick drinks a lot of alcohol, but it doesn't help him. Powell informs him that they can never get high since they are always on duty, and the contract does not let them get high no matter how much alcohol they consume. Meanwhile, Speck wants to try out his new weapon and massacres a church full of devotees. Powell, on the other hand, inquires about Nettles from Nick. Nick assures him that Nettles has saved his life countless times. Powell asks if they were looking for an ash lab the day Nick died. A surprised Nick asks Powell how they knew about it, and Powell further asks Nick if he knows what ash is. Nick explains it's a new type of drug that turns law-abiding citizens into sinners, to which Powell tells him that Hellraisers created it to recruit more people into their army. Powell further mentions that Nettles is an underworld wannabe who sells this drug in exchange for eternal life, and he's pretty sure that he killed Nick as well. Nick hits Powell after he makes this accusation against Nettles, to which Powell replies that either of them is an underworld wannabe. All of a sudden, the brand on Nick's chest starts glowing. Nick tries to fight the pain, but Powell asks him not to, as he could see the same thing. They both get the vision of the church massacre, where Speck is killing everyone with Michael's sword. They reach the site of the massacre, where the rest of the department is also present, and they discuss among themselves the crime scene. Meanwhile, Speck is already at the gates of the underworld and trying to enter when he is stopped by the three-headed dog, who tells him that he cannot enter with a weapon. Speck takes out his sword and threatens the beast before entering the underworld. On the other hand, Nick and Powell visit Nettles to ascertain a few things, but just as Nettles comes across Nick, he tries to flee. First, he jumps out of the apartment window and tries to escape by motorcycle, but crashes into a train at the railway crossing, but miraculously survives it, proving Powell's assumption right. Nettles tries to escape to the underworld with Nick and Powell still pursuing him. Speck, in the meantime, had recruited an army of demons with the help of the sword to rebel against Lucifer and challenge him to a duel. On the other hand, Powell and Nick prepare to enter the underworld in pursuit of Nettles. As they try to enter the underworld, they are stopped by the three-headed dog. The two try to shoot the dog with their pistols, but it barely has any effect. Then Nick shoots the creature with one of the big guns, blowing off one of its heads, instantly killing it. Meanwhile, Nettles tries to approach Lucifer but gets stopped by a creature who closely resembles a minotaur. Nettles tells him that the cops are chasing him, which enrages the beast, and he tries to devour Nettles. Nick and Powell arrive there at the very moment and kill the beast. Nettles tries to escape again, but Powell catches him using his lasso. Nettles asks Nick to return the favor and kill him, and right as Nick is about to grant Nettles' wish, Powell stops him, assuring him that Nettles will pay the price. Nettles asks Powell to leave him in hell, but Powell tells him that before he can return to hell, he will be charged with all the crimes that he has committed, so his life in hell isn't that pleasant. Before leaving, Nick notices Michael's sword with Speck, who's charging Lucifer with it. They interrupt the duel and try to arrest Speck. Speck instead attacks them, and they return fire on Speck. Speck keeps attacking them despite being shot, and they realize that the sword makes him invincible. They start shooting at the sword instead, and once they separate it from Speck, he dies instantly. Lucifer asks Powell how his master will react knowing he saved Lucifer, to which Powell tells him that he is forbearing and asks if they can take Nettles with them, to which he agrees. As soon as Powell and Nick arrive at RIPD with Nettles, Powell's brand disappears, officially marking his retirement. Powell wishes Nick before leaving, and Nick continues to spend the rest of his 100 years of service. To Protect and Serve the Living RIPD, 2013. The movie that came out in 2013 has a different plot than the comics. Ryan Reynolds plays the character of Nick Walker, whereas the protagonist of the comics is named Nick Cruz. During a cocaine bust, Boston police officers Bobby Hayes and Nick Walker steal gold. Nick starts to regret the crime he committed and decides to turn in the gold. At the subsequent cocaine bust, Hayes murders Nick by shooting him. Nick finds himself in an office when time stops all around him, and he gets sucked into a whirlpool. Mildred Proctor tells Nick that he is dead and is on his way to judgment when they first meet. She enlists him in the RIPD, whose mission is to track down and apprehend Dedos, the soul of those who passed away but avoided judgment. Roy Cephas Pulsifer, aka Roy, an Old West lawman, is Nick's companion. Roy brings Nick to see his own burial, where he chats with his wife Julia, but she fails to recognize him. Roy reveals that the appearances of RIPD officers have been altered and that they are forbidden from disclosing their genuine identities. Now Roy appears to be a stunning blonde woman and Nick is an aged Asian man. Roy brings Nick to interview Stanley, a potential Dedo. They question Stanley until he is revealed to be a Dedo. Before Roy shoots Stanley, Stanley makes an attempt to flee and vomits up a lot of the gold he's been eating. Nick flings Roy in front of a bus after an argument between them, causing Roy to lose his hat. Nick and Roy walk back to the office and file the gold as proof. Nick asks Roy to find an informant so that they can look into the gold properly. Roy takes Nick to see Elliot, a Dedo who says the gold is worthless. Nick observes Elliot giving Hayes the gold as he leaves it with Elliot. Before following Hayes to the airport, Roy and Nick track him to Nick's house, where they witness him dig up the stolen gold Nick has hidden. When a Dedo leaves with the gold that Hayes had given him, Roy and Nick intercept him. Instead of speaking, the Dedo bursts and transforms into a massive monster. Nick and Roy engage in a public pursuit that results in Nick retrieving the gold, but with the Dedo eluding capture. Before being transported to Eternal Affairs to be punished for the Dedo getaway, Nick and Roy return to the headquarters to reserve the gold. They discover that the gold is a component of a mythical object known as the Staff of Jericho, which has the power to close the portal to the altar life. Until a hearing, Nick and Roy are placed on suspension. Julia flees from Nick when he leaves and attempts to reveal his true identity to her. Once more at odds, Roy and Nick reconcile after Nick apologizes. Despite their suspension, they chose to find the remaining gold. When they approach Hayes at home, he admits to being a Dedo. They detain him and take the remaining gold. Hayes activates a gadget at headquarters that immobilizes RIPD personnel, while the Dedos grab the gold back and flee. The Dedos close off the streets and start pulling together the Staff of Jericho on a building's top. In order to utilize Julia's blood to power the staff, Hayes severely wounds her as Nick and Roy struggle to get to the building. While Nick diverts, Hayes and Roy obliterate the staff. The dead start to descend onto Earth. Nick shoots Hayes in the head, eliminating him as the vortex closes. As Julia is dying and witnessing Nick's true personality, time pauses all around her. After a heartfelt farewell, Nick advises her to continue living her life on her own. In the hospital, Proctor, who now looks like a doctor, checks on Julia as she awakens. The Proctor assures Nick that Julia will be okay and he owes her a favor. Proctor informs Nick and Roy that Eternal Affairs held their hearings without them. While Roy gains 53 additional years of service, Nick receives a warning. Roy and Proctor enjoy a sweet moment and make up before Roy is taken aside and given his cowboy hat back. Nick is thrilled when Roy offers him a new identity until he realizes that he suddenly looks like a Girl Scout wearing orthodontic equipment. RIPD 2, Rise of the Damned, 2022. Rise of the Damned is a prequel to the 2013 movie, and it stars Jeffrey Donovan as Roy instead of Jeff Bridges, and follows the story of how he ended up in the RIPD. The movie begins in 1876 at Red Creek in Utah, where a miner accidentally digs too deep and opens up a portal to hell. A month later, Roy is at a train station in Horseshoe, Wyoming, where he has to receive his daughter Charlotte and her fiancé Angus, who are about to get married in 5 days. All of a sudden, a group of outlaws attack the station, and Roy dies in the ensuing gun battle. Once he dies, he is recruited to the RIPD by the head of the West American Division named Hannah. She also tells him about Deados, the souls of the dead people who have escaped judgment. She tells him that it is the job of the RIPD, capture them and send them to hell. Hannah then takes him to choose his new weapon, to which he says that he only uses his gun named Susie, to which she replies that it is useless against the Deados. Hannah assigns Roy to investigate the unnatural occurrence that took place at Red Creek a month ago, which she describes as some sort of hellish discharge. Roy insists on seeking revenge for his death, but Hannah dismisses it, reminding him no matter what he does, it wouldn't bring him back to life. Hannah further tries to explain the terms of his service, but the fact that he can't get back to Earth is a good enough reason for him to join the RIPD. As soon as he agrees to join the department, he gets his chest branded with the department's insignia. After that, Hannah sends him through a portal back to Earth and tells him that he only has 2 days to solve the case before his time ends. The doorway leads him to Earth, where he gets rammed by a bison right after he comes out of it. As he is about to get up, a woman riding a white horse shows up and introduces herself as Jeanne, his new partner. He tells her he doesn't need a partner and prefers working alone. He also tells her that he is her senior and has been at it for 20 years. Jeanne reminds her that he may have been her senior if he was alive, but considering he had been dead for only 3 days, whereas she has been dead for the past 445 years, it automatically makes her the senior. After the disagreement, Roy goes his own way. Meanwhile, the group of outlaws that killed Roy are at a bank where they're holding the manager at gunpoint. The manager agrees to empty the coffers, but they reveal that they aren't there for the money, but for the people. Roy, on the other hand, returns to his own place, where he sees his daughter mourning his death. Just as he is about to enter the house, Jeanne stops him and takes him away. He tries to return to his daughter, but Jeanne stops him yet again, leading to a fight between the two. Jeanne reveals that no human would be able to recognize him since he doesn't look like himself, but like a young black woman. She also reminds the second chance he got was to restore order in the world and not to his old life. As they talk, a pastor tells them that the outlaws have also captured Angus. That is enough for Roy to leave all his other duties and pursue the outlaws despite Jeanne's constant pleas. Both of them end up at Snake Gully, where the U.S. Federal Marshal is taking the Samuel brothers captive in a carriage. It is there that they discover that the outlaw Samuel brothers were actually Deados. After realizing that, Jeanne uses a plan to deceive the marshals, and both of them pop one of the brothers by pouring holy water on him. The Deado then reveals its true form, only for Roy to kill it. Jeanne kills another brother. Roy is about to kill the last of the brothers when he reveals that they are all working for a man named Otis, who keeps all humans captive near Red Creek and is planning something big. At Red Creek, we see Otis is facing a dilemma where his people are trying to challenge his authority, so he decides to demonstrate his powers by killing one of the Samuel brothers, consolidating his position. He then asks his Deados to feed the humans and mask them up for the grueling work ahead. Roy and Jeanne reach Red Creek with their captive after some time, and they find the town surprisingly empty. They check themselves into a hotel, and the helping lady tells them that the townfolk is at a mine where they discovered something valuable. The two do not believe this and decide to investigate themselves. At night, Otis rounds all his Deados to take the kidnappees to mine for work. At the hotel, Jeanne and Roy interrogate Slim, who reveals he only delivered the kidnappees to the church and nothing else. Both of them decide to investigate the church, where they find the place decimated. Behind the church, they also find Butterfield, the hotel owner and the town's mayor, bound and kept in a carriage. It is here that they learn of Otis's plan, where he wants to use humans to break open a portal to the underworld since they could not do that by themselves. They are attacked by a group of Deados and get captured and are kept with the other humans. Right before midnight, Otis summons all his human captives to start working on the portal. Jeanne notices Nell alongside Otis and figures out how they got their hands on RIPD weaponry. It is here that Nell reveals that Jeanne is none other than the legendary Joan of Arc. All of them leave for the mine except the two RIPD officers. Otis opens the portal with his captives and unleashes the fury of hell in the mortal world, transforming every human into a Ditto. Jian tells Roy the only way of stopping this rampage is to drop Tears of Christ right in the center of the Hellfire, but they can only accomplish it if they are able to escape their captivity. It is then that Slim shows up and helps them escape by killing the Deados guarding Roy and Jian. Jian refuses to accompany Roy because of her horrific experience with fire. Roy goes to the mine with Slim and they start killing all the Deados. He asks Slim to save all the humans and starts tackling all the Deados by himself, but Jian musters her courage and joins Roy and Slim at the mines. She saves Roy from a Deado and drops the Tears of Christ right into the middle of the Hellfire, closing the portal. As the portal closed, it also sucked all the Deados into the depths of hell. Just as they were about to celebrate, Otis showed up in his real form, Astaroth, one of the members of the evil Trinity. After a gruesome battle, Roy was able to take him down with bullets dipped in Tears of Christ, thus ending the ordeal once and for all. Marvelous verdict. The RIPD franchise belongs to a certain genre that either pulls you in or casts you out. From the goofy storyline to wacky characters with a dash of myth, this makes for an exciting combination. The execution is a little shaky, but it sure is entertaining. But if there is something the franchise isn't missing out on, it is humor. So if you want a good hearty laugh, this franchise is waiting for you. If you enjoyed this video, click on the like button, share and comment below about which other series, movies, characters, or video games you would want us to explore or review. And please do not forget to subscribe to our channel to get more regular updates.